Russia's energy empire is burning, and Ukraine lit the match. For decades, Putin ruled the world with oil and gas, holding Europe hostage and raking in billions. But that machine is broken. Pipelines are shattered, refineries are in flames, tankers are stranded, and the once mighty Russian fuel industry is bleeding out. Every strike, every sabotage, every lost barrel is a dagger in Putin's war chest. What was once Russia's greatest weapon is now its greatest weakness. Ukraine has cracked the spine of Moscow's energy machine, and the collapse could bring Putin's entire empire crashing down. It's winter 2021. European homes are freezing, factories are shutting down, and energy prices are exploding. And in Moscow, Putin is smiling. This wasn't an accident, it was a weapon. For over 20 years, Putin turned Russia's vast oil and gas reserves into the ultimate geopolitical sledgehammer. Europe needed warmth, and Putin had the valve. One twist, and entire nations would beg. Germany's industrial heart, dependent on Russia's gas. Italy's power grid, addicted to Moscow's fuel. Even the mighty France couldn't escape Putin's energy web. The numbers were staggering. Russia supplied 40% of Europe's natural gas and 27% of its oil. That's not trade, that's control. Every pipeline, every tanker, every cubic meter was leverage. Pay Putin's price, follow Putin's rules, or freeze in the dark. Putin weaponized winter itself. When tensions arose, the gas mysteriously slowed. When sanctions bit, Europe's energy bills soared. It was extortion on a continental scale, and it worked. Europe's leaders walked on eggshells, terrified of angering the man who controlled their heat. The psychological warfare was even more devastating than the economic impact. European politicians lived in constant fear of the next energy cutoff. Cabinet meetings in Berlin, Rome, and Paris invariably included discussions about appeasing Moscow to keep the gas flowing. Putin had effectively colonized European decision-making without firing a single shot. The Kremlin called it energy diplomacy. The rest of the world knew better. It was energy terrorism. And Putin, he was just getting started. But what he built next would make his gas weapon look like a water pistol. Welcome to Putin's money printer, a sprawling industrial monster that turned black gold into geopolitical power. This wasn't just about oil wells and gas fields. This was an entire ecosystem designed to milk every drop of profit from Russia's energy dominance. The crown jewel was the pipeline network, massive steel arteries stretching thousands of miles, pumping liquid wealth straight into Putin's war chest. Nord Stream alone could deliver 55 billion cubic meters of gas annually. That's $20 billion in revenue flowing directly to Moscow. Yamal Europe, Turkish Stream, the Druzhba oil pipeline. Each one a financial lifeline keeping Putin's regime alive. But the real genius was in the refineries. Russia didn't just pump crude. It processed it, refined it, and sold it at premium prices. The Omsk refinery, the Ryazan oil refinery, massive industrial complexes that turned raw petroleum into aviation fuel, diesel, and gasoline. Every barrel refined meant double the profit, double the leverage. The sophistication of Russia's energy processing capabilities was often underestimated. The Kirishi refinery could produce over 300,000 barrels per day of high-quality petroleum products. The Nizhnekamsk petrochemical complex didn't just refine oil. It created the building blocks for plastics, synthetic rubber, and industrial chemicals that fed into supply chains across Europe and Asia. The numbers were mind-blowing. At its peak, Russia's energy exports generated over $300 billion annually. That's more than most countries' entire GDP, flowing into Putin's pocket every single year. This machine funded the military, the intelligence services, the nuclear program, everything that made Russia a global threat. State coffers overflowed with petrodollars. The Russian National Wealth Fund swelled to over $180 billion, providing Putin with a war chest that seemed inexhaustible. Energy revenues didn't just fund governmental operations, they bankrolled Putin's global ambitions, from military interventions in Syria to election interference campaigns worldwide. Every drop of oil and gas sold translated into expanded Russian influence. The energy wealth created a parallel economy within Russia. Entire cities existed solely to support the energy sector. Surgut, Noyabrsk, and Novi Urengoy became boomtowns built around oil and gas extraction. Millions of Russian jobs depended directly or indirectly on energy exports. The energy became so dominant that economists warned of Dutch disease, the over-reliance on natural resources crowding out other economic development. But Putin made one fatal mistake. He thought this machine was untouchable, and he was about to learn just how wrong he was. October 2022. Russian engineers are sipping coffee at the Omsk refinery when the sky explodes. Ukrainian drones flying hundreds of miles behind enemy lines had found their target. The refinery, Putin's money printer, was suddenly in flames. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Russia's energy infrastructure was supposed to be protected, untouchable, sacred even. But Ukraine had just proven that Putin's empire had a glass jaw. The strikes came like lightning. Drone swarms targeting refineries across Russia, mysterious explosions at pipeline facilities. Cyber attacks were shutting down pumping stations. Ukraine had declared war on Putin's energy machine, and they were winning. The scale and sophistication of the attack shocked even Western intelligence agencies. Ukrainian special forces demonstrated capabilities no one thought they possessed. Long-range drones penetrated hundreds of miles into Russian territory, navigating air defense systems with surgical precision. These weren't random terrorist attacks. They were strategic military operations designed to cripple Russia's economic foundation. The tactical innovation was remarkable. Ukrainian engineers modified commercial drones for military purposes, creating swarms capable of coordinating attacks across multiple targets simultaneously. The Lukoil refinery found itself under assault from drones approaching from different vectors, overwhelming defense systems never designed to handle such coordinated strikes. The Druzhba pipeline, Europe's longest oil pipeline, suddenly started leaking. Coincidence? Not a chance. Saboteurs had struck the heart of Russia's export network, turning Putin's profit stream into an environmental disaster. Cybersecurity experts identified sophisticated malware attacks on Russian energy control systems. Ukrainian hackers, possibly with Western assistance, infiltrated the computer networks, managing oil and gas flows. Refineries found their production systems mysteriously shutting down. Pipeline operators discovered their monitoring equipment had been compromised, providing real-time intelligence to Ukrainian military planners. But the real shock came from the Black Sea. Ukrainian naval drones, unmanned killers, started hunting Russian oil tankers. These weren't military ships. They were civilian vessels carrying Putin's liquid gold, and Ukraine was sinking them without mercy. The SIG tanker, carrying millions of dollars worth of Russian crude, destroyed. The Kavkaz, a ferry critical to fuel supplies, sent to the bottom. Each sinking was a message. Putin's energy pyre was no longer safe, anywhere, anytime. Maritime insurance rates for Russian vessels skyrocketed, as Lloyd's of London and other major insurers classified Russian tankers as uninsurable risks. Shipping companies worldwide refused to transport Russian oil, fearing their vessels would become targets for Ukrainian naval operations. The world watched in shock as Ukraine vastly outgunned, outnumbered, and systematically dismantled Russia's energy network piece by piece. But the biggest surprise now was yet to come. Here's the moment Putin's world came crashing down. February 2023. European imports of Russian gas plummeted 90%. 90%. Putin's energy chokehold, his ultimate weapon, had simply vanished. The numbers were brutal. Russian gas exports to Europe fell from 155 billion cubic meters to just 15 billion. It's not a decline. That's economic annihilation. Billions of dollars in revenue just gone. But how did Europe escape Putin's trap so quickly? The answer is pure desperation breeds innovation. Liquefied natural gas terminals started sprouting across European coastlines like mushrooms after rain. Germany built floating LNG terminals in months, not years. Countries that had never imported American gas were suddenly signing billion-dollar deals with Texas producers. The energy map of the world had flipped overnight. Norway became Europe's lifeline, increasing production from North Sea fields to historic levels. Qatar went from regional player to global kingmaker, leveraging its LNG capabilities to fill the Russian void. Even tiny Azerbaijan suddenly found itself with the power to dictate terms to mighty Germany through the Southern Gas Corridor pipeline. American energy companies found themselves with European customers they had never imagined possible. Texas natural gas that once supplied only to domestic markets.
Yeah, a majority of power plants that make electricity in Texas run on natural gas.
Was suddenly flowing to German industrial facilities. Pennsylvania shale gas reached Italian power plants. The American energy export boom, which had gradually been building for years, exploded into a strategic realignment of global energy flows. Russian oil faced the same fate. The European ban on Russian crude created a massive hole in Putin's wallet. $100 billion lost in revenue annually. Sure, Russia tried selling to China and India at massive discounts, sometimes 30 to 40% below market price. But even those deals couldn't replace what they'd lost. The discount sales revealed the desperation in Moscow's energy strategy. Russian oil that once commanded premium prices was being offered at fire sale rates just to find buyers. Chinese refineries, recognizing Russian weakness, demanded even steeper discounts and more favorable payment terms. India negotiated deals that would have been unthinkable when Putin held energy leverage on global markets. Energy traders who once feared Putin's pricing power were now dictating terms to Moscow. The tables had completely turned. Russia went from energy kingmaker to desperate seller, begging for buyers in a market that no longer needed them, and the Kremlin started to panic. Behind closed doors in Moscow, Putin's energy advisor delivered the news no dictator wants to hear. The money was running out. Internal Kremlin documents leaked to intelligence services painted a picture of absolute desperation. Energy revenues, the backbone of Russia's budget, had collapsed by over 60%. The war chest Putin thought would last years was emptying at a terrifying pace. The panic showed in desperate moves. Russia started selling oil to North Korea. North Korea, just to find buyers. They offered massive discounts to African nations, sometimes selling premium crude for less than the cost of production. Putin's petroleum empire was having a fire sale, and everyone could smell the desperation. Finance Minister Anton Siluanov's classified briefings to Putin revealed the true scope of the crisis. Government revenues from oil and gas exports had plummeted from $180 billion annually to less than $70 billion. The state budget designed around energy windfalls faced unprecedented deficits. Social spending cuts became inevitable as the Kremlin struggled to maintain basic government functions while funding an expensive military campaign. The budget mathematics were terrifying for Putin's inner circle. Military expenditures consumed an ever-growing share of declining revenues. The National Wealth Fund, once thought inexhaustible, was being drawn at rates that suggested depletion within years rather than decades. Regional governors reported growing unrest as federal subsidies disappeared and local services deteriorated. Even more telling were the secret negotiations. Russia's energy officials quietly reached out to European intermediaries, practically begging for ways to restart energy trade. The same Putin who once cut off gas supplies to punish Europe was now desperately seeking backdoor deals just to keep money flowing. The Shadow Fleet expanded frantically, with Russia acquiring aging tankers from anywhere they could find them. These rust bucket vessels, many decades old, were pressed into service to smuggle oil through increasingly sophisticated sanctions networks. It was a sign of how far Putin's energy empire had fallen. Russian state companies began cannibalizing their own operations to generate cash. Gazprom sold off foreign assets at below-market prices. Rosneft liquidated strategic petroleum reserves. Novatek postponed Arctic development projects that had been central to Russia's long-term energy strategy. The fire sale mentality revealed just how desperate the situation had become. Industry insiders reported that major Russian energy projects were being abandoned mid-construction. The Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, intended to supply gas to China, faced indefinite delays as resources were diverted to more urgent needs. Arctic LNG facilities that represented the future of Russian energy exports found themselves without financing or foreign technology partners. The brain drain from Russia's energy sector accelerated as experienced engineers and executives sought opportunities abroad. Western energy companies quietly recruited Russian talent, offering lucrative packages to professionals who understood the technical aspects of Russian energy infrastructure. Putin's energy machine wasn't just losing revenue, it was losing the human capital necessary for future operations. But the most shocking revelation, intelligence reports suggested Putin's inner circle was questioning the sustainability of the entire war effort. Without energy revenues, Russia couldn't fund its military indefinitely, The economic foundation of Putin's power was cracking. The man who once held Europe hostage with energy threats was now watching his greatest weapon turn into his greatest vulnerability. But the story was far from over. Here's the brutal truth Putin doesn't want you to know. His energy empire may never recover. The infrastructure is shattered, the customers are gone, and the world has moved on without Russian energy. The damage goes beyond pipelines and refineries. Putin destroyed something more valuable than any physical asset: trust. Energy is a long-term business built on reliable partnerships and stable contracts. Putin weaponized that trust, turned it into a threat, and European buyers will never forget. The economic mathematics are devastating. Rebuilding Russia's energy infrastructure would require hundreds of billions of dollars and decades of work. But who's going to invest in an industry that might be bombed tomorrow? Who's going to build pipelines in a country at war with its neighbors? International energy companies that once partnered with Russian firms have completely severed relationships. ExxonMobil wrote off $4 billion in Russian investments. BP abandoned its stake in Rosneft, accepting massive losses rather than maintaining exposure to Russian energy markets. Shell terminated partnerships that had been decades in the making. These aren't temporary business adjustments, they represent permanent strategic realignments. Even if the conflict ended today, sanctions would remain for years. Insurance companies won't cover Russian energy projects. International banks won't finance them. Western technology companies won't sell equipment. Putin's energy empire is trapped in economic isolation with no clear path to recovery. The legal complications alone would take decades to resolve. European companies have filed billions of dollars in compensation claims for broken energy contracts. International arbitration courts are processing cases that could force Russia to pay massive penalties for weaponizing energy supplies. The legal overhang will discourage future energy partnerships even if political relationships improve. But Ukraine might not be done. Intelligence reports suggest even more sophisticated attacks are being planned, targeting the remaining pillars of Russia's energy network. Putin's nightmare is far from over. The global energy landscape has fundamentally shifted. Renewable energy investments accelerated as European nations sought permanent independence from fossil fuel imports. Putin's energy weapon inadvertently triggered the greatest green energy transition in history, making his petroleum empire increasingly obsolete. The generational change in European energy thinking cannot be overstated. Political leaders who once flew to Moscow to negotiate energy deals now speak of energy sovereignty as a national security imperative. An entire generation of European energy professionals has learned to operate without Russian supplies, creating institutional knowledge that will persist for decades. Putin's energy empire is in ruins, but this story is far from over. Ukraine's war on Russia's energy structure continues to evolve, and the global implications, they're massive. If you want to understand how this energy disaster is reshaping global power, how Putin's desperate moves are backfiring, and what comes next in this economic war, make sure you like this video and subscribe for more insider analysis. Hit the notification bell and I'll see you in the next video.